Hey there, welcome to an impromptu video, the top 10 video game terms that we get wrong. At number 10 in our lineup we have this game. How do you pronounce this? Well, in the coin-ops they actually pronounce this and I always pronounced it Gradius because we have lots of weapons of various grades and we can upgrade those weapons, and so I really did used to call this Gradius, and most people still call it Gradius, but actually Gradius is probably the correct name for it. At number 9, tell me the name of this game. Yes, many people call this Xout because the sequel to this game was called Xout, and so Xout was the name that we actually read in the magazines when this was released, and when we went up to that counter we said, can we have Xout? But the programmers of this game actually called it Crossout, and that appears in the title sequence. Is this game Xout or is this really Crossout? Well, in the popular term it is Xout, most people call it that, but in a literal term perhaps the programmer decided to call that Crossout, or perhaps even the voiceover artist got that wrong. At number 8 we have this company. How do you pronounce this? Well, some people call it Tengen, some people call them Tengen, and I think that the real name is actually Tengen because that comes from the Go game where this was stolen from.
Tengen.
And yes, Atari are famous for stealing from the game Go. So Tengen is actually the correct pronunciation for the team, which is the Atari team, which masqueraded on all the platforms as Tengen. At number 7, name this game. Yes, I always call this Ikari Warriors, but it could really be Ikari Warriors, or even Ikari or Ikarai Warriors. And yes, if you type this into a Japanese pronunciation on the internet, it actually says and pronounces this
Ikari Warriors.
Ikari Warriors. Ikari Warriors.
So I will always call this Ikari Warriors and not Ikari Warriors because Ikari really doesn't sound very well, but I will never call this
Ikari Warriors,
even though that's probably what it's called. At number 6, name this game. Yes, I always called this the Great Giana Sisters, and the Great Giana Sisters is how most people pronounce this game, except for the creators of this game, who call this the Great Giana Sisters.
And we call her the Giana Sisters.
So even though this is the Great Giana Sisters, I'll still pronounce this Giana Sisters, probably because of the Ford Gia models which appeared in the 1980s and 90s, and I will probably never call this Giana Sisters, even though that's how the creators of the game intended it.
Namen ausgesucht, Giana, und damit waren dann die Giana Sisters geboren.
At number 5, name this company. For the longest time I always called this company Konami, as in economy, because I always thought these games were budget games.
Konami.
Konami. Konami.
Konami.
But apparently this company is called Konami.
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 And so that is closer to the original name, and of course Westerners pronounce that Konami, trying to be Japanese, but it probably doesn't sound anything like it. At number 4, pronounce the name of this company. Well, I always called this Taito, but apparently the name is close to Taito.
Taito Corporation.
Taito Corporation.
Taito Corporation.
Taito Corporation.
Taito Corporation.
But In the West, I always called this Taito,
Taito Corporation.
because that's probably how it's spelt, and yet again in the magazines, when I tried to read that in magazines, that's how it came across. So sometimes I say Taito, and sometimes I've now modified that to Taito, which is somewhat closer to the original. And number 3, pronounce the name of this company. Internally, this company was always known as Psygnosis.
Psygnosis, because I'd always been fascinated by Psygnosis actually.
And everybody referred to the company internally as that name. But outside of the company, everybody referred to it as Psygnosis, as referenced on the Blood Money introduction sequence.
First, there was Menace. Now, Psygnosis presents a DMA design game.
From this point on, everybody knew them as Psygnosis, including Eric Schwartz, who created his anti-lemming demo, and as you can see, it definitely says Psygnosis on the cover of that demo. If the name of the company was pronounced Psygnosis, then this would be spelt differently on the Eric Schwartz demo, and he may have called the demo Psygnosis, because Psygnosis is much closer to the Anti-Lemmings demo. Because of the unfortunate Blood Money introduction, most people still call this company Psygnosis.
Cynosis. Cynosis.
Cynosis.
And Psy meaning mind and Gnosis meaning wisdom, that would be an obvious way to reference the company, but no, the company still insists they are called Psygnosis, even though they folded many years ago.
Is it Psygnosis or Psygnosis?
I was going to comment on that at the beginning, actually. Everybody pronounced it Psygnosis, but the guy who invented the word pronounces it Psygnosis. So internally, we would always say Psygnosis. And people say, but it's got a Y, but so is the word hypnosis.
Psygnosis.
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 Synosis.
Synosis. Psygnosis.
Number 2. Name this man. Yes, this is Jack Tramiel, the same Jack Tramiel that invaded the world via Commodore, and just like Napoleon, he swept all before him. This man is known the world over as Jack Tramiel because that's how it's spelt, and yet again in the magazines, when we read that name, we pronounced it Tramiel. And he actually called himself Jack Tramiel because that wasn't his real name, and you would have thought if he was so concerned about it, he would simply rename himself, remove the I, and call himself Jack Tramiel. Well, he did the next best thing. He opened up his own company after Commodore and called that company Tramiel Technology Limited. And it still didn't work, everybody still called him Tramiel.
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 Tramiel. Tramiel.
Tramiel.
At number 1, name this company. Yes, id Software is known the world over as ID. This all began due to those magazines again, and unfortunately, instead of putting a small I and a small d to pronounce the word id, they put a capital I and a capital D in there so that every reader pronounced it ID. You may notice on the original shareware release of Wolfenstein, it is a capital I and a small d, which makes it look more like I'd. So publishers tended to put a capital D, which makes it look like ID. Back in the day when we were all 14, 15, 16 years old, the one thing that we really wanted was ID, and it was an in-joke that we had the ID via the software. But it was a bad in-joke because the company was actually called id Software, known after the Sigmund Freud part of the mind, known as the id, which is the childlike, creative, wild side of the mind, and the ego is the adult side of the mind, and the superego is the parent side. So the logic in calling the company id Software was to simply resemble the wild and untamable side of our minds. But yet again, when this came up recently in a recent Retro Hour interview, when Janelle GK's was really upset that everybody still pronounced it ID, she really ripped into those guys and let them know.
So later on you moved to working with ID software.
First of all, just for a clarification, it's called id.
Id, sorry.
Yeah, a lot of people make that confusion. When I was going to go work there, my spouse was working in a high school, and some of the people there were like insistent that it was called ID software. And no, we're pretty certain that the people who work there call it id.
Because that word is so ingrained in our mind from those magazines, unfortunately the response to all of that ear-biting from Janelle resulted in this response.
Later on after ID, you moved to Ensemble Studios.
And so we will always pronounce this company ID Software, even though it is pronounced id. Just as a bonus feature, name this connector. And that would be wrong if you said DB9, because it's actually a DE9 connector, and virtually everybody I know on planet Earth calls it DB9. To make it more confusing, there is a DB25 connector, but not a DB9. And if you type DB9 into Wikipedia, well, you're not supposed to find it because it's supposed to not exist. But it's become such a common term that everybody calls it a DB9 connector, even though it's an RS-232 connector as well, even though it's known under several different names. We all know it as a 9-pin connector.
DE9 connector.
DE9 connector.
DE9 connector.
DE9 connector.
DE9 connector.
DE9 connector. DE9 connector. DE9 connector.
Thank you very much for reviewing this top 10 video game terms which we get wrong, and I hope that you will continue to get these wrong and say it your own way. Thank you very much.